Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to start a brand new theme this week since it is a Monday, but it's also the week of Halloween. October 31st is on Friday. The last week of every October, we always do Spooky Week. And that's what we're going to be doing this week, listening to some spooky music, which doesn't necessarily need to be dark or intense or terrifying like Sinister Week was back at the beginning of this month, but there is going to be a darker element to it, but it could be family-friendly kind of spookiness too. Just a little bit more of that darker element to the music. Doesn't necessarily need to be intense though. We're going to kick it off with some Dead Can Dance. Anywhere Out of the World. We're going to be looking at a remaster that came out in... doesn't say. It really doesn't say. Okay, the original's from 1987 though. Let's dive into this and see what Dead Can Dance is bringing to the table today. Man, this is a solid start right here. Getting a lot of mileage out of just this chord progression. Just continuing to layer it up with new instruments. Alright, so we have a little bit of a modified hemiola there, which is a 2 against 3 polyrhythm. The bass doesn't keep up the consistent 3, but the bells do keep up a consistent 2. Yeah. Great way to introduce this verse, carving out space for the vocals and then bringing that, filling that sound back in. This new lick riff going on here, it's bringing in some even tenser and darker vibes just by playing 3 more notes on top of the chords that we have. Bells are always a good choice in a song like this. I love this melody. love how there's almost a semblance of a delay, as they frequently will play a note as a pickup into the next pitch. Very cool track. I do think it's just a little long in places. 5 minutes of one chord progression is a bit much. I do like the variety that we get on top of that, but there are certainly a couple of places in there where I felt that the pacing was just a little slow for me. That's a subjective thing, though. Objectively, this is fantastic. No, that's subjective too, but I really enjoyed this. This is a fantastic track, and I think that it's a perfect way to start off the week because it's not. I think this is a good showcasing of the difference between at least how I categorize spooky versus sinister or eerie. There's definitely an eeriness to this, but there's also a playfulness to this. And I think it's more of like a gut thing, more than something I could really put in words. But none of this feels physically unsettling. There's definitely an eeriness to it, a creeping element, but it doesn't make me feel uneasy. And I think the big difference is if you put this into a haunted house, is it going to fit? Is it going to, elevate the mood in a fun way, or is it going to elevate the mood in a terrifying way? And we listened to some stuff during Spooky Week Sinister Week that was like really intense, like made me start to sweat a little bit because of how unsettling it was, how uneasy I became listening to it. And this isn't. This has a very digestible type of eeriness to it. And I think and hope that this is what we're going to get more of this week. Now, it wastes no time getting into this either. Right from the start. Chord 1, all right, interesting. Chord 2, spooky. It takes no time to try to figure out where we're going to reach that atmosphere. Like right from the start, you're like, okay, I know what we're in store for on this. And I love how they just jump right into that, slowly layer it up. We bring in some extra instruments, fill out this size, carve some room out, put the vocals there, fill it back in. And I mean, that's pretty much the basis for a lot of this track. The first half of it is, these are all the layers we have for this idea. We can remove some, we can put them back in, we can take one out and leave that little space empty. And let's just play around with these stacks here. We're not actually going to change anything to the music. So what if we remove the vocals? What if we put them back in and remove the violins? What if we remove that choir-esque sound on the outskirts of this? It's really, creating the largeness, the fullness to it. It's about adding and removing elements. And I think that's what makes the back half interesting, because we carve out some of the stuff that sits on top and then we add new ideas there. We had started off with, what instrument was that? Was it an organ? It just gave us like 5 notes in total, but it was spread out across both chords. So kind of just a lot of notes are just lingering. And I think it was the third note really adds a lot of darkness and tension. It really ups the ante a bit. And then after that, we bring in the bells and we get that wonderful little melodic lick that carries us through to the end of the track. And it's about taking that same foundation we established from the beginning and injecting new ideas into it. So the first half of the song is about building the foundation and playing around with some ideas and combinations of those ideas, not really adding new ideas into it, but the combinations of simultaneously played concepts. And then it's like, okay, we've done enough with that. Let's actually put some new stuff in it. And that's what carries us through to the end of the song. Pretty straightforward idea. Very well done execution, though. And I love how even at the end we bring the bells in, and I'm like, okay, this sounds like a good way to wrap the track up. And then they still bring the vocals back on top of that and recontextualize even the bells. They give us a variation on that by looping it back around and introducing some stuff from the beginning of the song. Expertly done, and a great way of keeping what I had mentioned. It's one idea on the bottom. This song doesn't change, really. The chord progression is the same from the beginning to the end. And the instruments and sounds that we hear, we only have one shift, really, and that's at the end when we bring in the organ and the bells. But despite the lack of new ideas being tossed in, like individually new ideas, the song is kept fresh by giving us new combinations of ideas throughout the entirety of it. And I think that's a really smart way to go about doing something like this. If you want to retain a lot of ideas from start to finish, change some things up, some ornamentation, mix and match ideas that you have, different instrument lines. Keep it interesting and changing despite the static main concept. Now, there's something that stood out to me here. I found myself bobbing and moving to this song a bit more than I typically do for spooky music. There is definitely music out there that is both groovy and Halloween appropriate. But for whatever reason, when I hear something like this, and particularly even at the beginning with just the chords, syncopation and groove weren't necessarily the first thing I thought of, and it kind of made me want to dive into, on my own time, a bunch of traditional Halloween music. If you go to the dollar store or something and buy one of those Halloween sampler discs, and it's like a bunch of public domain spooky music that you can play in your local haunted house or something. I'm curious how much of that's going to be groovy. It's just, to me, when I first think of it, and this is like complete gut reaction right here, I have no data to back this up, I don't think of grooviness and Halloween together unless it's like fun, Monster Mash. That's got some groove to it, but it's also not like a spooky song. It's a spooky themed track. So when this song comes in, kind of heavy, we just have these chords holding them out, kind of grooving with this a little bit, just kind of feeling this weight. And then the bass comes in, though, and we get that syncopation. I had mentioned that we have a hemiola there, which is a polyrhythm of 3 beats versus 2 beats. So when one instrument does 3 beats within a space, the another instrument is going to do 2 beats within that same amount of time. It's not a perfect hemiola, though. The bass that is playing the 3-beat part isn't consistent. They're playing 5 across the entire run because there is a small delay between beats 3 and 4 that gives it even more syncopation beyond the polyrhythmic element of it. But it is super groovy. Something about it just kind of makes you want to get like this snappy head movement and kind of get the body going, and it feels good to move to. There's a groovy element to this track. And it's rather persistent too, even towards the end of the song as the bass is starting to get overshadowed by the vocals, the organs, the strings, the choir, everything's going on. The bass is still down there. It's just not as prominent as it was when it was first introduced and took up a majority of the attention. But we also had the bells come in around this time that the bass was starting to get drowned out, and the bells have this really cool pickup based syncopation to it, where you play a note, and before you play the next note, you play that note again quickly, bum ba-dum. You kind of have that da-da, that little jerkiness into the next note. And it creates a syncopation to it. Dun, da-dun, 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 da-dun. And it's got this groove to it. Now the bells have this cool melody, but they're also introducing syncopation into everything. The vocals are not very syncopated at all. The general chord progression, which is being played by like 4 instruments, just give this massive foundation to everything. Not a lot of syncopation in there. But it's these other parts, the bass, the bells, and even that organ part. It's not everything is directly on the beat, although it's a lot of space between each note, so I wouldn't necessarily call that groovy, but it is syncopated against the backbeat. It creates all these rhythmic grooves, and it makes the song dancey, even though I don't think the atmosphere really feels like it lends itself well to that. It works. I really like that about this track, and I think it's one of the things that helps with the, not necessarily uniformity, but the repetition of it. Like I mentioned, from start to finish, like 70% of it's all the same. There's a lot of variety to what goes on in the other 30%, but I also think that aside from that, just having this groove to go within, kind of introducing new rhythmic flavors alongside the harmonic and melodic flavors, it's just another way of keeping that, that freshness going for the song, keeping it dynamic enough to work for 5 minutes of a very similar foundation. Definitely a good track to start the week off with thematically, although I think that's about all I have for the analysis, given it is pretty much just one song that does one thing for 5 minutes straight. Let's hit some lyrics, see what's going on there. This is an interesting theme to pair with the general vibe of this track. It's a song that asks, is life about participation? The verses talk about trying to find reason in life, about pushing the boundaries and really experiencing life. It says we scale the face of reason to find at least one sign that could reveal the true dimensions of life lest we forget. It says that we go out there, we do these wild things, we scale insurmountable odds looking for purpose. Why are we here? Verse 2 says, we lay by cool, still waters and gaze into the sun, and like the moth's great imperfections succumb to her fatal charm. The metaphor of a moth to the flame, so transfixed by the light that it ends up burning itself alive. Here, this is the same thing. We gaze into the sun, and we fall to the charm of the sun, possibly damaging our eyes. This could also allude to Icarus in the sun, another way of using the sun as a means of, breaking past our boundaries or finding enlightenment. Even light is built into that word, and being damaged from this knowledge, from breaking these boundaries. It's about, going out into the world and figuring out what it's all about, regardless of the cost and the dangers. The chorus, though, presents the opposite. The first chorus says, maybe it's easier to withdraw from life with all of its misery and wretched lies away from harm. The second chorus says, maybe it's me who dreams unrequited love, the victim of fools who watch and stand in line away from harm. The verses talk about people who feel the need to go out there and discover things, no matter the cost. The chorus talks about a safer, easier life that is just one without some of those pleasures. That it's easier to withdraw into solitude and not make connections with people, not find uncomfortable truths, not try to determine what life is about, but simply live one of comfort. The final verse then states, in our vain pursuit of life for one's own end, will this crooked path ever cease to end? I'm not entirely sure what this represents. We have a crooked path, which is one made of hardships. but it wonders if it ever ends. And it says that our pursuits to possibly search for a reason or purpose or whatever, or also just withdrawing for safety and comfort, that both are vain pursuits. That life isn't about either one of those, because both are from the perspective of the self, trying to keep the self safe, trying to make the self wiser or smarter or more fulfilled. It says both of those are vain pursuits on a crooked path, and it wonders if there's an end to either of them. Maybe I did have a stronger grasp of that ending than I thought. It's an interesting track that I think, I don't want to say that it says a whole lot of nothing, but it does pontificate on two sides of an idea and does not provide any answers. In fact, it creates, to me, maybe even a false parallel between the two of them. I'm not entirely on board with the idea of kind of putting them to both be vain pursuits. But I can see the perspective of it, that both are for the enrichment of the self. The actions themselves may be different, but the reasoning behind them is the same. But I do agree that neither really have an end. You're either always going to protect yourself until the end, or you're going to seek out a purpose that, I mean, many great philosophers in our past have sought out and haven't come to any conclusion. It does seem like one of those things. What is the point of life? What is the point of human life, even more in particular? There's just no good answer for that. It's not, especially not one that's going to satisfy everyone. So I like the final line, asking if the path ever ceases. But then I think about this topic and the music they played it with. And it brings up something interesting in that this type of music, I don't know if you've ever got a CD for, haunted houses or something. And it's got like classical music on it, right? The interesting thing is a lot of that classical music was originally written for the church. What we now associate with spookiness and haunted houses and Halloween in general was originally supposed to be a feeling of awe and respect for a larger power. Those songs culturally weren't understood to be scary or spooky when they were originally written. And it makes me wonder if that isn't the purpose of this track. Not to create something that's scary. I still think this definitely. It was this 90, I said 87 actually. I still think that'd be accurate. I think this sound was still fairly in the pop culture lens, a spooky sound when this came out, but it could be a reflection back to when this sound was originally created. And I do think that the use of the organs, the strings, and the choirs here point towards that time. And I wonder if there is supposed to be an element of reverence, of larger than life, of something beyond the physical plane here, not in a supernatural way, but one in a spiritual way. Because this song is about asking about the meaning of life, something beyond the day-to-day living. That's the only way I can see the music and the lyrics lining up at all. Because otherwise, you just have a spooky Halloween song with someone waxing poetically about what the purpose of life is. And the two of those I don't know necessarily line up really well. But, this is just my opinion on Anywhere Out of the World by Dead Can Dance. What do you think of this track? What is your perspective, opinion on it? What's your take on why they combined these lyrics with this sound? Put all of that and any other thoughts you'd like to add to the conversation into the comment section below. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.